Hello and welcome to EBC TV. My name's James and today we're going to be talking about the mental wellbeing side of our Wellbeing TV offering. I'm joined by the amazing Keira Wallis from Healix. Keira, how are you doing today?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. It's amazing to have you here. So tell me what you do professionally for Healix.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a nurse by background. Surgical oncology is my speciality and I am head of clinical operations at Healix.
Brilliant. Now we're going to talk a little bit about resilience today because it's one of those phrases that we talk about a lot now, and we didn't really things like burnout and stress and anxiety and resilience didn't exist when I was growing up, but we talk about them a lot now, which I think is great, isn't it? Because there's an awareness happening as a result. So we hear the word resilience a lot when talking about mental health. What does resilience mean and how can we build it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, James. It has become a bit of a buzzword, hasn't it? And I think there's a bit of misunderstanding about what resilience really means. It's not an ability to be immune to any situation or hardship. It's actually the ability to adapt and overcome and recover from adversity.
Right.
So when you think of a situation that might be a problem, it might be something that's a challenge for you, there's typically three ways that you're going to react. Some people will react to that situation and develop some kind of post-traumatic disorder, whether that's anxiety or distress as a result. The majority of people will just go back to baseline, which is where they're sitting previously emotionally. And then you have a group of people who will then go on to develop post-traumatic growth. And what that means is that not only will they overcome that situation, but they will actually learn, adapt and grow from that experience. And that's the aim. Ultimately.
So you were talking about the middle bit there was the default setting.
Yeah.
So that's where we're all kind of in our comfort zone.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here is maybe pushing upwards from there to a different level that then becomes the new default setting.
Yes, absolutely. And that is the aim. Yeah.
Love that. The term biopsychosocial model sounds complicated. Can you explain what it means and why it's important to understanding mental health? So biopsychosocial model.
Yes, absolutely. Sounds complicated. It's not. It's just a framework by which we can explain mental well-being. Well, actually, you could explain any kind of well-being within that framework. Ultimately, what it means is that you have biological components, psychological components, and social components that dictate how well you are in yourself.
Yeah.
So biologically, we've got things like our genes, which can predispose you to mental ill health or physical ill health. You have things like your hormones.
Yeah.
We all know, especially women, that hormones can have a big impact on your well-being. We have things like your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise. All of those are biological foundations of well-being. And from a psychological perspective, you've got things like how you think, how you cope with things, your emotions, your reactions. And socially, you have things like your environment, your relationships, your work, lived experiences. All of those things work together to shape your well-being as an individual. And I think what's important about this model is that actually, if you look at it from the perspective that it can be really empowering, because a lot of people think that mental well-being is all in your head or mental ill health is all in your head and it's a chemical imbalance. And actually, we know that's not the case. We know that these three areas have a huge impact on that. And so in a way, you can look at it as there are things that you can control to ensure that you have good mental health.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, you mentioned in the middle of that answer, sleep, exercise and nutrition. So how do they affect our mental health?
Really important. So you could probably think of them as the biological foundations of good mental health. So sleep, really important. We hear about it a lot. It's important, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, switch off devices before you go to bed. Yeah. But sleep is so important. So what's happening on a biological level at sleep is not only are you resting, but your body is actively repairing. And that goes as far as your brain as well. So you have a system called the glymphatic system, which works overnight and processes and removes any waste product, any proteins in the brain. Some of them are even linked to things like Alzheimer's.
Okay.
So sleep is absolutely key, really important. So if we neglect that, that's going to have an impact.
And before we move on to the other two in that triumvirate, how many hours sleep should we be getting?
That is a good question. Some of it depends on your age, but
Yeah.
I think 8 is a good average.
Okay.
Between 7 and 8 is a good average.
Okay. I have some friends that say, "Oh, I can survive on 4 or 5 hours sleep." Is that are they deluded, or are they just some people that are ever so slightly different and they actually can function on that?
Potentially. I think the key word you've used there is survive. So you may be able to survive on it, but can you thrive on it is the key.
Okay, good. That brilliant answer. Brilliant. I love that. So you're surviving, but you're not thriving.
Potentially.
Okay. I absolutely love sleep. And I stupidly one day went on LinkedIn and told everyone I love sleep and I always get 8 hours and I monitor it on my watch and it makes me feel great. And then someone trolled me and said, well, thanks a lot, but I can't sleep. I've got really bad problems with insomnia and so on and so on. Thanks for bragging about it, but I can't do it. Oh. And I felt really bad that I actually do sleep quite well. So, what if people do suffer from insomnia, how can they get better sleep solutions for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sleep hygiene is really important. So again, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, nothing's too stimulating before bed, all the usual things, avoid caffeine, avoid alcohol, screen time.
Yeah.
I think those are all sort of fairly basic things that we can do. So neurodivergent individuals can experience difficulty with sleeping. That is something that is well recognised. And so in those situations, there might be something like melatonin that might be appropriate for them.
Okay.
I think it is a personal thing. Any concern, speak to your GP about it. But going back to those levers that you can pull and you can control, then sleep hygiene is really important.
Okay. So we've talked about sleep. What about nutrition?
Nutrition, really important. There's been a lot of research and development in recent years into gut and gut health.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you something now that will probably blow your mind. So serotonin, you've probably heard of serotonin, which is a really important neurotransmitter and hormone that impacts on mood regulation and sleep and lots of other things. Between 90 and 95% of serotonin is synthesized in the gut, not in the brain.
Right.
Which is...
Okay. So serotonin is being talked about a lot.
Yeah.
How do I change my serotonin health position? How do I get more serotonin in my body?
Yeah, absolutely. So gut health is key. So lots of whole foods, whole grain foods, lots of fiber and omega-3, Mediterranean diet, fish oils, absolutely. All of that is really important.
Okay.
And avoid processed and ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
We're seeing increasing links between that kind of gut health and that gut brain axis as well, which supports that. Your stomach is really important, or your gut is really important in regulating mood in the brain as well. So really just ensuring that you've got a really varied diet as well, lots of plants.
Okay.
Really important.
A friend of mine was lecturing me about this a couple of years ago, and she made me buy all these pills to improve my gut biome. And I bought them. They're really expensive. And after about a year, when I took them religiously for a year, I didn't feel any different. Yeah. And then someone else said, "You don't need to buy pills. Just do it with your own. What you put in your mouth controls it, not pills."
Absolutely right. Yeah,
okay.
100%. There is no real substitute, I don't think, for a good, wide, varied diet. So aim for 30 different plants and veg, plant-based foods every week.
Yeah. Okay. And cut out processed food. So, and that is a big sadness for me, because my favourite thing in the world is sausages, and they are ultra high processed, aren't they? Because anything that's been through a mashing machine and had loads of stuff thrown into it is probably not good.
Well, yes and no. I think there's a difference between processed and ultra processed. So processed is just changing it from its original form. So you can get sausages that are, ultimately meat and a bit of herbs and spices.
Okay, all right.
So
good.
Look for high quality sausages with lots of meat content. Ultra processed is a slightly different category, and that's the one that we're looking to avoid.
Give me an example of an ultra high processed food.
It's essentially something that you would not be able to make at home with ingredients from your cupboard. So It could be something like a pot noodle. Am I allowed to say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, why not? Let's
Yeah.
shame pot noodles.
So something like a pot noodle, which you just would not be able to recreate at home.
Right.
And actually, if you look at the ingredient list and if there's things on there that you can't pronounce or can't really understand, then that's probably telling you that it's ultra processed.
Okay. All right. There's a good tip there. So looking at the ingredients, and it's got all numbers and letters and things, big long words ending in fates.
Absolutely.
It's probably a bad thing. Okay. Keira, thank you. We talked about sleep. We talked about nutrition. Where does exercise fit in?
So exercise, and I wouldn't necessarily call it exercise. I would talk more about movement.
Yeah.
So any kind of movement is going to be good for you.
Okay. Now you mentioned something a minute ago called BDNF.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's brain-derived neurotropic factor.
Okay. What's that?
And it's fascinating, actually. It's a protein that your body generates, which is involved directly in brain cell generation and regeneration, but it's also responsible for building and developing neural pathways in the brain.
All right.
So really important, not just that general brain health, but also ensuring that that your pathways in the brain are firing and active.
So we're talking about neural pathways. Is that something that would therefore help with things like dementia?
Potentially, yeah,
because
absolutely.
that isn't. I mean, I'm no dementia expert, but isn't that in the same ballpark?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
There's definitely a connection there. I think when we talk about neural pathways in mental health, I suppose I'm more thinking along the lines of cognitive reframing, where you're effectively doing a bit of CBT on yourself by ensuring that you're strengthening the pathways. It's funny with the brain, the more you use a pathway, the better it.
Yeah.
The more it fires up and the more active it is. So going back to that cognitive reframing, if you're quite a negative person or you have lots of negative thoughts, those pathways are going to be stronger in your brain. So almost like negative thoughts then lead to you using that pathway and creating more negative thoughts. So you can reframe that by making that more of a positive thought.
Yeah.
And that will in turn strengthen those positive pathways.
Many people experience anxiety and low mood, but how can someone tell the difference between normal stress and something that may need a bit more support?
Yeah, absolutely. So stress is an interesting one because stress isn't a bad thing as a concept. And in fact, there's a specialist will differentiate between two types of stress. You've got eustress, which is good stress. And that's the kind of stress that we need. It motivates us, get up in the morning, helps us to grow and develop. And then you've got distress, which is ultimately the kind of the negative or the more challenging stress. And that's where you can get into difficulties is if there's prolonged exposure to distress, or there's no kind of break in between episodes of stress to help you recover. So how someone might be able to identify that distress is now having a negative impact or an adverse impact on their life. So it's things like if it's there constantly, if it's impacting on your daily life, if it's having an effect on your sleep and your eating, all of those things, that's when you might start to look at it and think, actually, this is something that I need to address now.
Can something like that creep up on you without you realizing?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
What are how would you, if it's a slow creep, how would you know? Are there things that you can test, like blood pressure and heart rate, and what would I be doing to try and maybe do a quick sense check of my own journey in that regard? Yeah,
absolutely. Very good question. So they say that stress is a bit like sand; it creeps out somehow. Yeah. So it could be biologically. So in moments of kind of acute stress, then your blood pressure is going to be raised, your heart rate is going to be raised because you've gone into that kind of fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
But I think when we talk about chronic stress is potentially what we're discussing here, which is that kind of more low level stress that's there continuously and you're always aware of it, or you may not be aware of it because you've kind of learnt to live with it.
Yeah.
It's a bit more insidious, more difficult to detect. So I think probably the best way to identify or give yourself the tools to be able to identify that insidious stress is by being really self-aware in the first place.
Yeah.
And you can achieve that by monitoring your mental well-being in the same way. So you mentioned earlier about, you track your sleep on your watch.
Yeah.
You might track your daily movement, your steps. Do the same with your mental health. So track your feelings. You can do mental health check-ins. There's various, different apps that you can access. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. What practical everyday things can employees do to protect their mental health and build resilience, especially during stressful times. So how do I build my resilience if I was in the workplace, for example?
Yeah, good question. So there's something that I really like, and is that resilience is not built in times of crisis.
No.
It's built in the everyday. And how do you build that resilience? So there's lots of different things that can help build resilience, and you can look at people that are naturally resilient and try and identify the characteristics that they might have in common. So it's things like resilient people tend to be very self-aware. So they're aware of their thoughts and their feelings, and they're also very good at challenging those unhelpful thoughts that we mentioned earlier. So being self-aware is really important, because then that will also enable you to cognitively reframe.
Yeah.
Optimism is another characteristic of people that are resilient. And a lot of people think of optimism as something that you're born, you're either born an optimist or a pessimist. And yes, people do tend one or the other, but there's a lot you can do to encourage learned optimism. And again, it goes back to that cognitive reframing.
Yeah.
Other characteristics of resilient people are they experience connection, whether that's with other individuals, connection to their work, connection to family, home, whatever it might be. And that ties in really closely with a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
So I think it was Nietzsche that said that anybody can tolerate the how as long as you have a why.
Yeah. Okay.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. If you have that that purpose, then that's going to help drive you.
Keira, thank you so much for being on the show today and for answering all these brilliant questions. It's been amazing having you on the show. Take care and stay well. But once more, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.